So the power of swing really comes into play when we extend the class JFrame and we customize the window itself. So we could avoid boilerplate code, and that class will take care of its own, of its job, and that job being displaying window or interaction window or whatever you want to call it. So what we want to do is create a new class, and I don't know, let's say we're going to call it GUI in this case. And we're going to extend JFrame, right? Why are we extending JFrame? Well, if you remember in the last video, that's the object we needed to create to have that window. So the moment we extend it and we create this window, we're basically creating a JFrame, right? So the moment I put this in one and the other one, let's just move this into the same thing. So the moment I extend JFrame, so the moment I create a GUI, I'm also creating a JFrame because it's part of it. It's inherited. So what we need to do here is to create our constructor. So public GUI. Do I need anything? It's up to you to determine that. Do I want to maybe have a title? Do I want something? It's customizable to your heart's content. So go for it. Otherwise, what we need to do is to do each one of these calls. So we could check, one thing is to go check JFrame itself and see what it has there. A good tool that's easy is to go on your structure on the left. Or if you don't have it on the left, you could go on view and go find that tool window you're looking for called structure somewhere right here, Alt 7. Anyway, inside of this, you could see a list of all your methods and all your fields that's there. So inside our JFrame, you'll notice that we have actually 4 constructors. So we have the JFrame by itself, and we could read some Java doc here. We got one that takes a title. So we could overload this one if we wanted a title. There's some other stuff with graphics configuration. Anyway, so let's go back here. So we could overload, we could have one GUI without, and we could have one with for constructors. Do we need to? It's up to you. So determine that, and if you need to even overload the GUI, overload the constructor, go for it. In my case, I don't think it's needed. The GUI, so far we only have one, and later on, if we need to, we'll do it. So in this case, I'm going to set title. Notice that I'm getting access to a lot of methods, right? I never defined these methods, but I have access to all this method. Again, if you want to look at it a different way, we're going to say this current object dot, and notice that I have, oops, wrong button. Notice that I have access to a lot of fields, a lot of methods, and the list goes on. And again, these are methods and fields inherited from JFrame. Currently, GUI is a JFrame, so we have access to all of those. So I don't need to say this. I could directly just access those. So in this case, I'm accessing a setter for the title. GUI window. And in this case, because we are extending JFrame, we have access to all of those because they are part of us. In this case, part of GUI. So let's go back to the other page. So we needed not only to set the title, which I done it manually over here. We need to set the size, the location, and the visibility. So you know what? I'm going to copy that, bring it back here. And in this case, we're specifying JFrame, which doesn't exist. So all we need to do is remove the object that is being specified. And now what we're doing is we're setting the size to 500, 500, the current window. We're setting the location to null. We're setting the default close operation. And last, and this needs to be last, we're setting the visibility of it to true. And this is important to be last. We'll talk about it a bit later. But basically, you could think of it, this refreshes the window, so all new updates are shown. So what that means for us compared to this one? Well, it means now we could do something like this. GUI, let's say GUI 1, new GUI. Right? And we're going to run it. And look what happens. Now we got one window and we got a second one. Right? And look at the boilerplates are gone because we don't need to mention this. They're being mentioned inside the constructor. This is where the power of extending it comes in. These boilerplate, we could leave it be. Now, if ever I needed more of these windows, well, I just have to repeat this, give them a new variable name, and just run it again. And in this case, I'm going to get 3 windows, plus the default JFrame window that we created at the early stage. Maybe I don't want them to be all named the same thing. Well, now we could go ahead and go in our GUI. And rather than giving a title directly here, we could maybe give string title and give it to our super so he does it for us. Right? This is one way of doing it. Or we could also just not call the super and do it ourselves by doing this. Whatever works for you is okay. So now if we go back here, go to the 3, it needs to specify which. We need to give them some names. So GUI window 1. Abracadabra, whatever, who cares? Okay, so now we run it, and you'll notice now we get 3 windows with 3 different names by just doing 1 line of code. We're making our code much easier, much more readable, etc. So forth, so on. Cool. So now, having that done, having that said, let's go back to GUI. Now we could put our information in there, our interface and our interaction with the user, our buttons, our things, and so forth, so on. We're going to go keep editing this class that we created. And to be honest, if you want to, maybe eventually you'll get a derived class from this GUI, which requires these, but they're going to do something more specific. And then we'll extend GUI rather than JFrame, and so forth, so on. I'll see you guys in the next video where we'll talk about components.